Today is the day we make history. Let's do this.
You're never going to have an opportunity to have your vote count more in terms of the punch that it's going to pack than tonight.
It's like the equivalent of 1 million people showing up and the impact that it has on selecting the next president.
We're going to take this country back. We're going to make it greater than ever before.
There's the music. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. You can't keep me away on Election Day. I'm Chuck Todd, right here at NBC's election headquarters here in New York City, where we are just a few hours away from the official kickoff of the 2024 presidential election season. And it all starts in Iowa with the Republican caucuses. Doors close at precincts across the Hawkeye State in less than 4 hours. So we're going to dive right in. The best way to do that is to look at caucus night by the numbers. And you know what? The first number you need to know is 0 or below 0. Get those negative integers in your head. Today is by far the coldest caucus day in Iowa history. It feels like 20 below across the state. Once you're in negative numbers, it all feels bad. The nasty conditions over the weekend shut down some last-minute campaign events and could impact turnout tonight. That's a big one. The next number, though, is 28. It's the enormous lead that former President Trump in our final Des Moines Register NBC News Mediacom poll. A big win could send a strong message to the rest of the field heading into New Hampshire. Tonight is the start of the caucuses. Tonight is the start of primary season. Could tonight be the end of primary season, too? How big could this be? Well, that brings us to the next number to watch tonight, which is 13. That's the largest margin of victory ever recorded in an Iowa caucus. It was for Republican Bob Dole in 1988. By the way, Walter Mondale has the all-time record for that going back in 1984. But on the Republican side, this is the biggest one. Trump is likely, it would be a shock if he didn't break this record tonight at a minimum. You would assume he's going to win by at least 20. But you would assume he gets north of 13. Beyond Trump tonight, though, could be a game of survival for the field because second place could very well come down to the wire. Haley had a narrow lead on DeSantis in our final Iowa poll, as you can see there, with 4 points. At least that's what, and it would allow her to potentially finish second here, score the upset in New Hampshire. DeSantis has spent big in Iowa, and he needs second to keep his campaign alive. Well, with sub-zero temperatures, motivation matters, maybe even more so than any poll that you will see there. And according to our poll here, Trump supporters are the most motivated to back their caucus candidate. And I look at that. The motivation number almost matches his ballot number here. DeSantis is next. 23% call themselves extremely enthusiastic. But look at this yellow flag here on Haley. Haley may be second in the horse race, but she is way down the list on enthusiasm here. A lot of her voters, and we know this, a lot of her voters are not for her, they're against Trump. And in sub-zero temperatures, where you're wondering if it's even safe to drive, are you going to crawl on broken ice for somebody you're not voting for in November? Because nearly half of her supporters already plan to vote for Biden. So this, to me, is what we're all watching. But look, second place only matters if Trump is under 50. My colleague Hallie Jackson sat down with Ron DeSantis earlier today, who said his campaign's ground game is going to protect him from a political deep freeze tonight.
When you have the organization, I mean, if you're snowed in your driveway and you know you're 75 years old, we can send a truck come pick you up and we'll bring you to the caucus. And so we fortunately are built to where people can get the help that they need to be able to get to the polls. But I would just tell people this: you're never going to have an opportunity to have your vote count more in terms of the punch that it's going to pack than tonight.
Well, our NBC News team, we are fanned out all over the state of Iowa to bring you every angle of these caucuses, including driving conditions. Vaughn Hilliard has been covering Trump events all day. He's on the road driving from Fort Dodge back to home base in Des Moines. Dasha Burns is already in Des Moines, and Priscilla Thompson is in the northwest part of the state, Sioux City, Iowa. It's the home of evangelicals, but she's also been on the road covering the roads, how icy and snowy is everything, and more. Barrett's in DeWitt, Iowa, in the eastern part of the state, to walk us through what is going to happen when caucus goers there. That is likely Trump country. But let's begin with Vaughn Hilliard. So, Vaughn, Trump last night, I got to ask you, you cover the Trump campaign pretty closely. It's an impressive, you and I were talking yesterday in Iowa, it's an impressive list of sort of MAGA celebrities that he's got crisscrossing the state. But boy, Donald Trump himself seemed to be lacking some energy last night. He seemed very tired, more so than we've seen. Is this extra campaigning getting to him?
I mean, this is the part here. These are tough conditions here, as I try to drive and do this with you at the same time, speaking of conditions. Chuck, this is for Donald Trump here. This is a moment here in which he launched his candidacy now 14 months ago. He had the option to wait and ultimately, I guess, jump into this race a little later, but instead he decided to enter in November of 2022. And so for Donald Trump, what tonight will speak so much of is the extent to which he feels he needs to campaign ahead here. Is this race over? If he hits 45 or 50% support here, that sends a clear message that the maybe not majority of the Republican Party, but the plurality of the Republican Party is handily behind him here. And if you're looking at New Hampshire and South Carolina, for him, there's more pressure then on the actual criminal trials and civil trials that await him, as opposed to the actual his own political future, at least through this Republican primary process. And so for Donald Trump, this will validate for him to what extent does he focus on the trials, or does he need to actually focus more on Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis and actual substantive issues that come with running for president of the United States, typically.
You know, it's always interesting to me. I do feel like Trump and his campaign are always nervous that they're in a hot air balloon with a whole bunch of holes in it, right? And that it's just constantly leaking if they're not constantly filling it with gas. You have quite the relationship with caucus goers going back 8 years now, and you've done a tremendous thing that I think a lot of reporters ought to be doing, which is you've kept up with some of these caucus goers. What have you learned? And look, it's anecdotal, and you know you can die by the anecdote when it comes to political reporting sometimes. But it's fascinating to watch people who were anti-Trump 8 years ago start to fall in line.
Right. There was one voter, Luke Beta, who I just called up after 8 years of not having talked to him. He was 27 years old back in 2016. He was caucusing in Sioux City for Marco Rubio, an evangelical voter. I just called him up here this afternoon, asked him where his heart is at coming into this evening. He said he intends to caucus for Donald Trump. Over the course of 8 years, this is a party that is, really cemented itself as Donald Trump's party. And a former Marco Rubio voter, a young voter like him, is sort of evidence of that. I want to let you listen, though, also to two other women I talked to, because it's not just only the converts of the last 8 years, Chuck, but it's also those first-time caucus goers, folks who only became involved in this process in the last couple of years. Take a listen to two that I met this afternoon. 8 years ago, who did you caucus for?
Okay, I didn't caucus.
I didn't either.
But this is why I am
not.
this year.
Yes.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would have been Trump.
You guys didn't caucus?
No.
Have you ever caucused, or is this? Why is this your first
terrible?
go?
Because
it's crucial for Trump to win.
We have to do it this year. Yeah.
What is it that made you guys compelled to not only go out and caucus, you guys are here right now for this event. What is it about Donald Trump in 2024 that is so crucial for you guys?
Because our world is falling apart completely.
Immigration and economy. I'm retired and my 401k is going, yeah.
He loves America, and we love him.
Chuck, you and I in 2022 had conversations about Donald Trump remaking the Republican Party in his image by getting out several members of Congress who had voted to impeach him. Tonight will be evidence to what extent his electorate continued to remake the image of the Republican Party in Donald Trump's view. I think that is what tonight is going to be wholly a testament about.
All right, we shall see. Drive safe. That's more important than getting your hit right with me. Anyway, Vaughn Hilliard, always a pleasure, sir. Vaughn, thank you. Be safe out there. Move over to Dasha. She's, of course, been covering the DeSantis campaign. And Dasha, it's been interesting how the DeSantis press shop is trying to play expectations with us in the press. Just this afternoon, they sent out a communications department release, all the different times where Haley people said it's second or bust for them, that there's only 2 tickets out. I know what they're up to there. And then the other thing they did this afternoon is they went ahead and put out a schedule for New Hampshire over the next couple of days that's quite robust. So this is a campaign that at least is acting like it's pretty confident about its chances for second tonight.
Well, look, Chuck, I can roll back the tape and play you plenty of times when DeSantis said first or bust in Iowa. He confidently was going out saying that they were going to win this state. But over the course of the last several months, it went from first place to, you know what, second place still gives us a great path to victory, to now he's out here saying he's the underdog. The underdog in this state, Chuck, which is kind of ironic given the amount of money and resources that they spent in the state. They have been a bulldog in this state when it comes to the infrastructure that they have built here. And that's really what they're hoping gets them, makes that difference between second and third place tonight. You talked about the weather, you talked about the organization. They hope that that is something that helps them given the way that caucuses work, right? You're not just going into a voting booth at any point in the day, checking the box and walking out. You have to get there, you have to listen to the speeches, get there at a certain time. So they hope that that makes a difference for them tonight. It really might be the weather and that organization combined that helps DeSantis if he does get into second place. But if he doesn't get that second place finish, boy, Chuck, there are going to be some serious conversations between him and his advisors. Yeah.
Dasha, I want to make a confession, you know, not only in my own brief travels to Iowa, but also talking with some of my longtime sources. There's not evidence that Never Back Down is as powerful of an organization as the press releases claim. Now, I know we're more digital than ever, so yard signs aren't the measurement anymore and all of this stuff. But, you know, they claimed a lot. You know, if they really knocked on 1 million doors, then they knocked on almost every homeowner's door in the state of Iowa. How much of this is real in your mind?
Well, look, I have seen, you know, I was in their offices back in early last year, back in June, watching them train these door knockers. We've been in their headquarters over the course of the last couple of weeks, watching them phone bank, go out and knock some more doors. They have had a significant presence here. And when you talk to people on the ground, it really is the Trump campaign and the DeSantis campaign that have been the most present. Chuck, I think the biggest question is, though, you know, you can build all the infrastructure you want, but if the product that you're selling isn't something that people are interested in, that's where you have the problem. And I've heard from a lot of folks that it's really only in the last couple of weeks that they've seen DeSantis start to hone a message that maybe they could have bought if he started doing that early in the campaign. You know, last night he started to really get into and hammer Trump in a way that is sharper than we've seen him do before. A lot of people told me during that Gavin Newsom debate they saw a side of DeSantis that they were wondering, you know, where was this guy at the outset of the primary? So a lot of operatives and analysts and people that I've been talking to both in Iowa and across the country and donors have said, you know, if the guy that we've seen in the last couple of months was the guy that we saw, you know, back in March, April of last year, maybe things would have been different. But at this point, this is clearly not where they thought they would be.
It's amazing, Dasha, how many times I've seen candidates like DeSantis. They start as front runners. They're really tight. They're afraid of their own shadow. Then it all looks like it's falling apart. And they act like Janis Joplin, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. It's like, if you campaign like that all the time, maybe you'd be in better shape. Anyway, Dasha Burns on the trail with DeSantis. Dasha, thank you. All right, let's get to the all-important turnout weather report. That's what Priscilla Thompson is doing. She's up in northwest Iowa. And Priscilla, yes, Iowans are hardy, but this is absurdly cold weather. And more importantly, when the sun goes down, nobody wants to be out there with black ice. What are you seeing?
Yeah, Chuck, and potentially historically cold weather. We have been in the car all day driving around these areas to get a look at what the road conditions are looking like. And we actually have a camera on the dashboard so we can give you all a live look. There are a lot of roads where the snow is still completely covering the roads. We just looked at the Iowa Department of Transportation site. There are some areas around Iowa City that appear to be just completely covered in snow. And that is going to be the question, right? Are caucus goers enthusiastic enough to shovel that driveway, make sure they have a four-wheel drive vehicle to try to make it out to caucus with road conditions like this, the potential for black ice, and not to mention just the low, super low wind chills that are going to have it feeling anywhere from -20 to -40 throughout the state. Now, historically, we have not seen weather impact turnout. But again, we are not talking about typical weather. And so, of course, I've spoken to some Iowans today who say they are going to make it out. Trump supporters very fervent in their support, saying that there is nothing that is going to stop them from getting out. But I've also spoken to some other folks, some Nikki Haley supporters that have said, we'll see what the weather looks like and make a decision. And some Ron DeSantis supporters who, in fact, think that it could help him because some of those other folks may not show up, but they believe that his will. But ultimately, as you said, it's about enthusiasm. It's about turnout. And so we'll see what it's looking like in the caucus rooms tonight. Chuck?
Yeah. Will you brave these conditions to support somebody you don't plan to support in November? That's a question Nikki Haley is asking herself right now. Priscilla Thompson on the road. Be safe, obviously, out there as you cover these dangerous conditions. Priscilla, thank you. Let's move over to the other side of the state. For what it's worth, the eastern part of the state has been Trump country and Republican caucuses, but Maura is here to really give us a little bit of the logistics tick-tock tonight. You know, this is more like a firehouse primary than it is a caucus in that it's secret ballot, one person, one vote. There's no changing your vote, things like that. What else should people be aware of tonight, how to watch tonight, and how long is it going to take us to find out who finished second?
Well, Chuck, it could be a lot quicker than a lot of people might be anticipating, because it's important to note the Republican caucus is very different than the way the Democrats run it. We don't expect to see the chaos and the way it broke down last cycle, as you and I talked extensively about. But basically, we expect to see people can arrive at their caucus site anytime between 5:30 and 6. That's when doors open, depending on where your precinct is. There's 1,700 precincts across the state. And in some areas, like where I am here in Clinton County, those rural areas, they host multiple precincts in one location. We'll actually be at a high school later today where they'll have 3 precincts in one auditorium, about 500 people total there caucusing together. And once they come in, doors close just a little bit before 7, and that is when people gather. They run some official local party business, but then they'll also hear, the caucus goers will hear from candidate captains who will make a speech, a last-minute pitch to these caucus goers about why they should choose their candidate. And then, like you said, they cast their ballot, they count them up, and ideally we should have a sense of definitely the winner, potentially. Because of the polling that we're seeing with former President Trump, we'll probably get a sense of that a little earlier on. And then because we're seeing such a close run for second place between Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, that might take a little longer. But all in all, it should only be a couple hours of this caucus. You know, it's interesting, Maura, is that the places where Haley is going to do best are the places where the turnouts will be the largest, because they'll be in the more population centers. And those results will take us the longest to get. So you really may see some. It may take time for us to see what the second and third place picture looks like, even as we see the first place picture. Maura Barrett on the ground for us there as well. Maura, thank you so much. Well, there you go. How's that for a nice start to our big Iowa caucus coverage coming up? Football hasn't started yet, folks, so keep it right here and do our pregame for Iowa. Then you can start watching football after that. Tonight we'll have live analysis and breaking news coverage of all the results. We will be here. It starts at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBC News Now. Coming up, it is caucus night in America. We're going to dig deeper into what to watch for as caucus goers prepare to cast their votes in less than 4 hours from now. You're watching Meet the Press Now. And we are back. Every minute is another minute closer to the opening of the caucus doors, and we're less than 4 hours until those doors will get closed to start the actual process itself. We'll dig deeper into what we're watching tonight. So joining me now is one of the more knowledgeable people out there about the state of Iowa, Kay Henderson, News Director of Radio Iowa. Kay, you and I have both been covering caucuses since the 20th century. We'll just leave it at that. We won't say how far back into the 20th century. But let me start with sort of what makes tonight unique. I mean, you really have to go back to 1984, the last time where everybody was expecting a landslide.
Right. And to some extent in '88, people expected former vice president at the time, George H.W. Bush, to sort of have a cakewalk, and he didn't wind up having one here. But this has been an unusual campaign because you have Donald Trump campaigning as with, you know, sort of the wraparound that looks like a presidential campaign. and being president while he is not president, and actually going to places that he needs to win that he didn't do as well in last time around in 2016.
So what's something that one of the things about Iowa is that it usually does blow up expectations more often than it doesn't. Right. And you've seen it happen so many times that I'm sure you're sort of almost half expecting it. I am. I'm just trying to figure out what is it that we're not expecting tonight. Is it a bigger number of Democratic crossovers? Is it turnout is a disaster or whatever, right? Like, I'm expecting an unexpected. What say you?
Right. What's the wild card?
Right.
What's the wild card here? You know, did people look at the Iowa poll and see that Nikki Haley surged into second in the Iowa poll and they think, let's get on that bandwagon? Or has the DeSantis organization on the ground been formidable enough that they are going to turn people out in bitter cold temperatures? Or are Trump supporters who have joined the Trump campaign going to be so intent on giving him a sizable victory? He said he wants a thunderous victory here. He wants the campaign to be over after Iowa. I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen.
What's the are you surprised that Governor Reynolds' support for DeSantis at least doesn't look like it has been as impactful as I think a lot of us thought it would be? I mean, I have watched Reynolds take the Branstad machine and make it her own, and it appeared to be something that was formidable until she ran up against Donald Trump.
Right. Donald Trump is the most popular Republican nationally, and he's the most popular Republican in Iowa. I think it was not a calculation that she expected to make early in the campaign, but as things wore on, she felt compelled to jump into the race and let her own stand in this race be known, that as she explained in November, that she doesn't think Donald Trump can win the general election, and that's why she's asking Iowa Republicans to make a different choice tonight. And obviously that has really rubbed the former president the wrong way. He routinely criticizes her. So I think from, the Iowa perspective here, what happens to her after this campaign? Is her brand here damaged? Can she get the Iowa legislature to do the things that she wants in the future?
Kay, I'm curious if it's the entire elected delegation, really, in Iowa. It is shocking how they've all been disciplined. They could say it's about the caucuses, right? They hung their hat on it. But everybody, right, that entire Republican delegation stayed neutral. Chuck Grassley stayed neutral. Joni Ernst is neutral, but then showed up at a Haley event introducing her.
She was at a DeSantis event on Sunday night, too.
Interesting. I mean, do you detect that the Trump forces will look for retribution, or will these sort of the institutionalists in Iowa survive this?
Well, Governor Reynolds won re-election in 2022. She's not up for 4 years if she chooses to run. Joni Ernst is not up this year. Chuck Grassley just won re-election. He has a 6-year term that he's in the middle of. These are people who are not going to face retribution in this coming campaign. So I think they looked at the long view here. Also, obviously, they didn't want to alienate parts of the base. When Donald Trump campaigned in Iowa in advance of Chuck Grassley's reelection bid, Grassley got on stage and said, "It would be foolish for me not to accept this man's endorsement." I mean, these people are looking at the numbers. They're looking at where Iowa Republicans are, and they're making that calculation. So that makes the decision that Governor Reynolds made that much more remarkable.
No, it is, and it is something that certainly Iowa political reporters like yourself, this will be the story, because who knows, will this impact the caucuses in the future? They've already alienated the Democratic institutionalists. What happens if Iowans end up alienating the leader of the Republican Party for the long term? Anyway, Kay Henderson, great to see you. Happy Caucus Day.
Right back at you.
All right. Up next, we're going to get the view from the various campaigns, including the Trump campaign, as the former president looks to win Iowa by historic margins. A senior advisor to the Trump campaign joins me next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. The Republican candidates are making their final pitches to caucus goers today, urging them to turn out despite the blistering cold weather. And they're also trying to manage expectations ahead of the first 2024 contest. Governor DeSantis told my colleague Haley Jackson that no matter the result tonight, he's in it for the long haul. Not sure what else he would say at this point. Donald Trump, however, has taken a different tack. Over the weekend, during a tele-rally, the former president said he's looking to, quote, set records in Iowa. Well, joining me now is a senior advisor to the Trump campaign, Jason Miller. Jason, happy Caucus Day to you, sir.
Great to be with you, Chuck.
8 years ago today, you were with another campaign, and you were with the campaign that won the caucuses. Perhaps you will be known as the strategist that knows how to be with the winning candidates. But do a little compare and contrast. You were on the other side. You knew what a caucus campaign organization looked like, a good one, and you knew what one you thought was weak looked like. Compare Trump today to 8 years ago. Compare DeSantis today to Cruz.
Yeah, great question, and really there's not even a comparison. The team that is put together and the organization put together this go-around for President Trump is far superior to even what we saw with Ted Cruz in 2016. The other thing, too, Chuck, is I know a lot of times as political insiders like us, we tend to get in and talk about teams and structure and things of that nature, but at the end, it's really about the candidate, and now that President Trump has done this a couple of times, he is that much better of a candidate, and he's also his supporter base is also that much more experienced as well. When we talk about, for example, someone might be a first-time caucus goer, but if they've been to 3, 4, 5, 6 rallies, camped out overnight, waited in line for hours, that's a much better indicator of their passion and their commitment to showing up to vote. So we believe our people will be there this evening.
Why do you think that Bob Vander Plaats's ability to organize evangelicals against Trump this time has fallen? It looks like it's falling flat compared to 8 years ago.
Yeah, well, I think the Republican Party is now the party of President Trump. I mean, it's as simple as that. And President Trump, with his record as the most pro-life president in our nation's history, the conservative Supreme Court justices, the way that he delivered for the pro-life community, I think is big. That's why President Trump continues to lead in survey after survey with evangelicals. But it's also not just with evangelicals. You look at all across the Republican Party, and President Trump is showing, because of the polling, that he can beat Biden, that people want a winner. They want someone back. They want to get the White House back. How do you turn that around? They have that confidence with President Trump. They don't have that confidence with the other candidates.
If you don't get 50% tonight, isn't that a huge setback, not just a small one? The reason I say it is that this is a test of sort of the most devoted part of the party, right? People that will show up for caucuses. These are your true party goers, your party rank and file, people that are more than just a number on a spreadsheet. If you don't get 50% tonight, is that a red flag for you or a yellow one?
Chuck, don't go and try to raise expectations on me. A win is a win, and we're going to be happy with a win. Now, many people point out the fact that there's never been a winner by more than, 12.5 points. That was in 1988 in the margin between first and second. Nobody has ever gotten over 50%. So there are plenty of records that are out there. We're going to be happy with a win. Then we're going to go to New Hampshire, do the same thing there, and then on to victory after that.
It's been notable over the weekend. It's almost like you have a going out of business sale. Endorse Trump now or don't endorse. Is there a penalty for endorsing after Iowa? Or is there a reward for endorsing before Iowa?
Yeah, I think, well, a lot of it is people want to be with a winner. And people look at President Trump and say, he is a winner. He is going to win the Iowa caucuses. And people want to be on board. And I think we're going to see, even as we continue with some of the other primary contests, New Hampshire and beyond, there'll be a similar effect with people who maybe hadn't gotten on board.
But did you guys send the message that the president would be frowning upon anybody that didn't join before Iowa? That he'd take note of who was with him before and after?
Much more of an organic push. I mean, you see a lot of the elected officials saying, you know what, I was with President Trump before. He's going to win this thing. I've always had a good relationship with him, so let's go ahead and make it official. Maybe some of the folks may have been waiting or saying, I don't want to get out there too early. Now they're saying he's going to win. He's going to be the winner. I want to make sure that he knows that I'm on board. And so the momentum is everything's coming up Trump right now.
You know, it's notable to me, though, that every major Iowa Republican has not supported the former president. What do you make of that? The governor, the senators, the Republican congressional delegation, not a one of them. Why didn't one of them get on board, do you think?
Well, when you take a look at within the state of Iowa.
Yeah.
Is that what you, sorry,
yes.
breaking up a little
within
bit.
the state of Iowa.
I think there's been within the state of Iowa, I mean, there's been a bit of a tradition in Iowa. A lot of folks like to sit on the sidelines, don't necessarily want to get in and endorse. I think at the legislative level, we certainly have seen tons of endorsements for the president. We've seen with our well over 50,000 commit to caucus cards that we have collected, with the caucus captains that we've signed up. The grassroots is on board, but we're going to put up a big win tonight. Then I think everyone's going to join the team pretty shortly after that.
Do you expect the president's attack on Vivek Ramaswamy? That seemed to be an attack out of nervousness. Was he worried that Vivek was taking votes away from him?
No, I think that Mr. Ramaswamy messed around and he found out. And quite frankly, when you had that picture that Vivek posted on Twitter of the people saying, save Trump, vote Vivek, that's just nonsense. As President Trump said, he's trying to be a little bit too cute, and someone might be have supportive things or positive things to say about the president, but between those T-shirts, between the video, the hot mic moment where Vivek was caught talking to the lady and trying to, I mean, for lack of a better term, Chuck, he was trying to con this lady into thinking that the only way to help President Trump was to vote for him. Enough of this charlatan type nonsense. I mean, this is the first contest. You're running for president. Enough of the funny business. And as we saw with President Trump, he made sure people knew what he thought.
All right, Jason Miller, senior advisor to the campaign for Donald J. Trump. Mr. Miller, thanks for coming on, sharing your perspective. Stay warm. Let me bring in my panel today, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon, Eliana Johnson, and a former senior advisor to Tim Scott's campaign, Matt Gorman. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Matt, you're here, not in Iowa.
A lot warmer.
No, and I say this because perhaps Tim Scott was the first victim of this sort of Trump stampede that we're seeing now. What did you learn out there being on Scott's campaign? And if what you learned, do you regret trying to even try to find somebody else other than Trump?
No, I think when Trump suddenly started winning general election matchups against Joe Biden, suddenly the non-Trump folks, us, Nikki, Ron, lost the best talking point and the best argument we had for why there should be someone other than Trump.
Literally, if Biden were up 10 points right now, Donald Trump would be in big trouble in Iowa.
I completely agree. Because I cannot tell you how many times you go up to people in Northwest Iowa, the most conservative part of the state, like, I love the guy, voted for him twice. I just don't think he can win. Oh, wait a minute. The New York Times even saying he can win? Well, they have that excuse now to go and vote.
Eliana, the weekend, this sort of, like I said, it feels like a going out of business sale. Support Trump now, or you're not going to get inauguration tickets, or you're not going to get a speaking slot at the convention. Whatever it is, it seems to work because you got a whole bunch of people who thought, all right, and you could even tell some of them, I think, wanted to wait till they saw the last Des Moines Register poll before jumping aboard Jim Risch. But
Marco Rubio
as well. At least Doug Burgum, if you're going to do it, he at least threw himself into it and tossed pizzas with the guy. It's shocking because we have all these different times where they all said they were embarrassed by Donald Trump as leader of the Republican Party, and here they are.
Well, that's nice that you are, idealistic, and we're hoping for maybe better or, more principle from our politicians. But I read these as totally craven and self-interested endorsements. And I think there's two things we can draw from them. One, these guys believe Trump is going to be the nominee, and they do want to get behind the winner. They're hoping that he will win in 2024. And they want to be able to call in favors with the president. It's much more fun to be in a majority in Washington. And number two, I think they know endorsements don't matter. You know, you ask Jason Miller, hey, you guys haven't wrapped up any endorsements in Iowa. The governor, Bob Vander Plaats. We learned in 2016, Trump had no endorsements. Well, he had Chris Christie, but he didn't need them. You know, the party doesn't decide anymore.
Jeff Sessions.
Jeff Sessions. But, you know, so I think they know, like, we can do it. It's going to help us, and it doesn't cost. It doesn't have a cost.
What happens tonight? I mean, look, when I say what happens tonight, let's assume it is Trump sitting around 51. Maybe Haley ekes out a point ahead of DeSantis, right? But if it's a 20-plus point gap, does second place matter?
It matters if it's Haley because at least Haley seemingly has a path to continue in the
maybe
race.
Win a primary.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Even if DeSantis comes in a strong second, he'll physically be in South Carolina, but really, does he have a shot at winning it? That's the big question. There's no clear answer right now.
Well, I mean, if you're Trump now, you almost want DeSantis to finish second, right? You almost want to start helping him. Hey, I don't care if we get 45. Make sure that dude's in second.
You want to wound Haley going into New Hampshire, right? Because these things aren't a vacuum anymore, right? The idea that you can play in Iowa, then hold out to New Hampshire. No. The momentum will carry. So if Haley has a good night, relative good night, however you want to spin it, with the week gap only between New Hampshire and tonight, then that'll help her relatively.
I also think, Chuck, to this point, I think this is a little bit about 2028. People thought the post-Trump Republican Party might come in 2024 about a year ago. And now I think people are looking to 2028, and there's been talk about, well, would Ron DeSantis be a viable candidate then? Would Nikki Haley be a viable candidate then? And to that end, I do think the kind of campaigns these other guys have run, people are going to think about 4 years from now.
So how does DeSantis do this? Because he's now moving into Ted Cruz territory. It's funny, right? Ted Cruz learned that Fox doesn't do things honestly after the Wisconsin primary last year, 8 years ago, and now DeSantis is learning this. Can he come back to it? Like, Cruz eventually bent the knee. Can DeSantis?
That's a tough question. Because, look, 9 months ago, a year ago, what the platonic ideal of Ron DeSantis was then and where he is now is very different. And that really, in my opinion, has nothing to do with Fox. It's about how he ran the campaign and what he was shown to be once he started running. And that's not going to change in 4 years unless there's some dramatic, massive personality change.
Right. That's what I mean. It feels like he's not thinking about 28, Eliana. That DeSantis has crossed that Rubicon. He's now really, like Cruz did at a point, going, I can't believe I'm losing to this guy.
You know, I think all these guys are thinking about it, and then they're thinking about it right up until they make the decision that they're not going to do it. What strikes me about DeSantis is that the national stage is so different from the state stage. And, of course, we saw this with Scott Walker, but I do wonder if DeSantis himself has had that thought, and if it would dissuade him from running again, because whereas someone like Nikki Haley was successful, as a governor of South Carolina, and she's been moderately successful as a presidential candidate.
I mean, we're sitting here.
Her campaign.
We don't know that yet.
We don't know that yet, but I think in terms of expectation setting, her she's done well in the debates.
Well, Ryan Binkley has done well with expectations too.
But her ability to manage the internals of a campaign, it has not been beset by these media narratives that DeSantis' campaign is beset by. It does matter.
Well, it helps though, Matt, when you're a campaign of like 5 people. And that's been Nikki Haley's advantage until it's a disadvantage, which this weekend, the disadvantage of being a small campaign, we're starting to see.
Agreed. And look, Florida governors, Jeb Bush, Ron DeSantis, come in with a head of steam, enter into a race. The only place you have to go, essentially, is down, right? When you start small, low expectations. She wasn't, there was more hype about another guy from South Carolina that I used to work for in the presidential race. A lot more hype. So you have room to grow. And look, I think she's ably really outperformed expectations. And, whether 2028's in the cards or it's 2024 or whatever, she does right now leave or at least stand better than she started.
If you're Nikki Haley, are you glad that Larry Hogan went on CNN and endorsed you this weekend? Or do you or is that one of those where you're like, oh, that's nice, but why are you doing this to me now?
From my vantage point, I didn't think that was helpful to her, and I think the same is true with the articles that you're seeing about Democrats coming to vote in the Iowa caucuses for her. I don't think it's helpful to her in that it cements a narrative that, that Trump is out there saying that she's...
I just try to just go worse and say,
right.
I think he's trying to be able to say, I tried to support somebody in the Republican Party, and this is why I'm with no labels. That it was almost strategic. I think I'm not going to be that cynical.
No, I don't think it's helpful to her. Like, she needs to be perceived as a solid, fire-breathing conservative. Yeah. That's, and Ron DeSantis and Trump have been coming at her with this narrative. So not super helpful. And you could say the same about Chris Sununu in New Hampshire, I think. Yeah. Too many of the moderates lining up behind her.
It's sort of one of those things. You want all that moderate support without the megaphone. Yeah. Pat and Eliana, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
After the break, we're going to right back to the source on this question of whether Nikki Haley can weather the storm from Donald Trump as the frontrunner focuses his fire on her. Olivia Perez-Cubas, spokeswoman for the Haley campaign, will join us from Des Moines. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As Nikki Haley rises in the polls in both Iowa and New Hampshire, former President Donald Trump is out with some of his harshest critiques yet of his former ambassador to the UN. In recent days, he's been describing Haley's campaign as funded by Biden donors. He's called somebody he appointed as UN ambassador a globalist rhino on social media, and he told crowds in Iowa that she's, quote, not strong enough to be president. The attacks appear to be taking their toll a bit ahead of tonight. Look at Haley's net favorability rating in this Iowa caucus poll that we had out yesterday. It is in single digits. She is only 2 points in the positive. Her negative ratings among Republican caucus goers are in the 40s. That is not a good place to be on caucus eve. Joining me now is Olivia Perez-Cubas, the national spokesperson for the Haley campaign. Olivia, thanks for coming on. Let me start with...
Thanks for having me.
A basic question here. Whoever finishes third, should they get out after tonight, whether it's DeSantis or Haley?
Here's what I can say and what I want to remind you of. A few months ago, there were 14 candidates in the race, and Nikki was polling at 2%. Absolutely nobody but Nikki and the campaign thought that we would be here today, and we would be as strongly positioned as we are across all 3 early states. So I think the pressure is really on the other 2 guys. You've got Donald Trump, who keeps saying that he's going to win with 60% of the vote. And you've got Ron DeSantis, who has said repeatedly that he's going to come in first place. He's going to win the state. He's invested $150 million into Iowa. He has put all of his eggs in the Iowa basket. At this point, he's got not much to show for it. So I think the pressure is largely on them.
Look, I understand that argument, but I want to go back to, let me put it this way. Can you win New Hampshire or South Carolina if Ron DeSantis is an active candidate?
Well, I don't know if he's going to be an active candidate. I think on top of everything that I just laid out, he probably has a money problem. So we'll see how the night pans out. I think regardless, what we're focused on is having a strong performance tonight, taking that momentum into New Hampshire. As you said, we have the support of the governor. She is in a very solid second place there, within striking distance from the former president. He is now spending millions of dollars attacking Nikki in mailers, on TV. I think he sees what we see. I think he sees the momentum that we're having. And then we ride that momentum into South Carolina, which, as you know, is her home state. She is known there. She is loved there. Voters have taken a chance on her there before, and they're going to do it again once she earns their vote.
You've seen the Iowa poll that showed that 43% of Haley's supporters said if the choice was Trump or Biden, that they would end up with Biden. Are you actively trying to get non-Republicans to come caucus tonight, register as Republicans tonight, that may or may not be supportive of your candidacy in November?
Look, I think Nikki has broad appeal. She's a tried and true conservative. Anyone who knows her knows that about her. She's got a strong record as governor of South Carolina. She's got a strong record as UN ambassador. But I think above more than anything else, the Republican Party has to be a story of addition, not subtraction. We have been talking
for years about how we need to bring people into the fold, bring people into the tent. If Nikki can go out there and make the conservative case, and that brings people in, that's a good thing. And I'll add one more point. Republicans have lost the popular vote out of 7 of the last presidential elections. That is nothing to be proud of. At the end of the day, we should want a winner, and we should want someone who wins the general in a landslide, not in a nail clincher.
Governor Haley arguably went out on a limb to endorse Marco Rubio 8 years ago when it wasn't clear Rubio could win anything. How does she feel on caucus eve to watch Marco Rubio endorse Donald Trump?
Look, I can't speak to why the senator endorsed Trump. What I can say is that Nikki cares less about endorsements. She cares more about earning the vote and the support of actual voters. That's what we're doing. That is in part why you see her rise. It's why you see her surging in Iowa. It's why you see her surging in New Hampshire and South Carolina and far beyond. I think this race is just getting started, and we're excited about tonight and where it goes moving forward.
Is it no matter what, if Governor Haley comes up short in this nomination, is she 100% going to support the nominee of the party if the nominee is Donald Trump?
Yeah, she said many times that she'll support Donald Trump because at the end of the day, a Trump presidency is better than a Biden presidency, and it's better than a potential President Kamala Harris.
Is there any regret on the Haley campaign right now that you guys didn't focus on Iowa sooner?
I disagree with that. We've been in Iowa for the last 11 months. We've been here repeatedly. We've done over 150 town halls between Iowa and New Hampshire. We've spent about equal time in both. We've invested in both states. I think it's why you see her rising and surging in both states. And I think her message for a strong America, for a proud America, for a new generation of conservative leadership, it's resonating here in Iowa and beyond.
All right, Olivia Perez-Cubas, appreciate you coming on. It's going to be a long, cold night.
Thanks for having me.
But we will all be watching together. Thanks for doing it. I want to show it one more time. This is our most recent top-line number from our Des Moines Register NBC News Mediacom poll. Of course, it is known as the gold standard for a reason, folks, with a lot of tea leaves heading into tonight. So joining me now is Ann Selzer. She is the pollster behind the famous Des Moines Register NBC News Mediacom poll. And no other pollster, when they put out their analysis, actually has their name quoted by other reporters. It's always great that they actually pay attention to your analysis. And your analysis about the Nikki Haley number seems to have, it is everywhere, as you know. She may be in second, but it sounds like you don't feel good about Haley's chances at finishing second.
I wouldn't say I don't feel good. I think, Chuck, you're a numbers person. You look through the crosstabs at every single page, and little by little, page by page, a story begins to gel. So the first story was, look, she's up 4 points, and she's now by herself in second place. That hadn't ever happened before. But as we started charting through, well, what was underneath all of this, some of those numbers are just jaw-dropping. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't know if you have, but for her to be increasing in terms of the number of people supporting her, but those supporters expressing low enthusiasm, it's just an interesting thing, and I'm fascinated by it. I can't wait to see what happens tonight.
Can you remember a candidacy that relied on people that are not members of the party to do well in the caucuses? I mean, Obama famously re-registered a whole bunch of new people. I think a lot of those were more independents. Yes, there were some Republicans in there. But of course, that was a massive turnout, almost turned the caucuses into a primary. Any other example that comes to mind here?
No, I think it's unusual for candidates to think that they'll do the hard thing, which is go find new supporters instead of trying to convince people who already go to caucus. Because that's just one thing you have to do. To get the others, you've got to convince them to go to caucus in the first place. And that's much harder, more expensive.
I think the single biggest finding in this poll partnership that we've had is not any of these horse race numbers or enthusiasm numbers. It's the overall estimate of the electorate that you're finding. Of Iowa Republican caucus goers. This is going to be the most male-heavy Republican caucus in the history of Iowa Republican politics. I mean, It's been a pretty big transformation from 16's electorate to this one, has it not?
Well, I think what you're seeing is that the Republican Party increasingly in our polling statewide, not just on caucus, is led by a larger share of men, and that women, and this isn't just Iowa, this is nationally as well, women are showing more cleavage to the Democratic Party. And so that we see that maybe inflated a bit for likely caucus goers, I'm not terribly surprised by that.
A 60-plus number. I've been looking at that and just wondering, boy, is this actually a brick wall for Nikki Haley? That too many women have left the Republican Party, and that, you know, whatever little and we've seen it matter before. Women candidates have done better among women in Republican primaries or caucuses. And it feels like this is something we haven't talked about enough, but perhaps maybe the biggest brick wall of them all.
Well, I'll point out that there's very little difference in terms of how men are thinking about casting their caucus vote and how women are thinking about casting their caucus vote. So you're right, men are more plentiful, but we're not seeing a division within the people who are likely to caucus by that. In fact, Donald Trump wins every demographic group that we looked at, and you've looked at pages of banner points. You know that's if we were on to the fourth page, we looked at a lot of groups, and Donald Trump did less well with independents, for example, but he still had the plurality of that vote. So there are a lot of things that are so interesting, and so do independents want to show up on a cold night? If this isn't really their party? And we've got some people who are currently registered as Democrats who are going to show up. And again, will they turn out, and number two, will their enthusiasm carry forward to their candidate?
Well, one phenomenon we've all seen since Donald Trump has shown up in our politics, turnouts have gone up in general. So let's see if we see that again tonight. Ann Selzer, it's been a pleasure working with you during this primary and caucus season.
My pleasure, too.
You stuck with us through some tech issues today, so thank you for that as well. In addition to being Iowa Caucus Day, it's also, of course, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. When Iowa Republicans chose to schedule the caucuses for today, the party chairman simultaneously encouraged all the Republican candidates to, for the first time ever, participate in the brown and black presidential forum. But none of the major candidates chose to do so, forcing the organizers to cancel. Joining me now is NBC News campaign embed Nnamdi Egwuonu. Nnamdi, they had never held a Republican forum before. It had always been on the Democratic side. Why didn't this Republican forum get off the ground if it had some institutional Republican support?
Yeah, ultimately, Chuck, what I heard from organizers was that it didn't have enough candidates agree to participate. It's something that shocked and disappointed them. They pointed to exit polls from 2016 that showed that more black and Latino voters were supporting the Republican Party. And to them, this would have been an easy opportunity for the candidates to engage with those voters. And like you mentioned, they did have the support of Iowa GOP Chair Jeff Kaufman. The forum had also taken on new significance. Its 2020 forum won an Emmy. So they were pretty confident that they now had, the backing and standing to finally make a Republican forum happen. But ultimately, the only candidate that agreed to come was Ryan Binkley, who himself is a pretty relatively unknown figure, and they had to cancel.
Is some of this just about needing more elected officials that are not white?
For the organizers of this forum, perhaps they often tell me that they're not partisan. You know, they would have had the same backlash for Democrats had it been Democratic candidates who didn't come to the forum. But for them, they said this was actually one of the more diverse fields. 13 candidates, many of whom were diverse. So they were optimistic, but ultimately wasn't enough to get this off the ground.
All right, Nnamdi. In Storm Lake, which for those of you that have a rock music background, you will recognize that Dateline as well. Nnamdi, thank you. We'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now, and we'll be back tonight. Special coverage on NBC News Now of the Iowa Caucuses. It starts at 7 p.m. Eastern. And the news continues with my pal, Tom Costello, right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.